In New York City's Madison Square Garden, a brash UFC champion was about to cement his dominance with a mic drop. A night of routine fanfare turned volatile when a retired martial arts icon rose from the front row and stepped into the cage. Jamal, the Apex King, wasn't your typical title holder. For 5 years, he was a global MMA phenom, known for a perfect record, a ruthless fight style, and a social media bravado that packed arenas. When he challenged Silas Blackwood to a one-round exhibition, he had no idea he was awakening a disciplined warrior who'd been forged before MMA had a name. Blackwood didn't just accept, he dismantled King's confidence with nothing but precision timing and silence, triggering a transformation that would ripple far beyond the cage. What began as a viral publicity stunt would become a humbling rite of passage. The crowd came for a beatdown, but witnessed a baptism, and New York would never forget the night a legend taught a champion what true power looks like. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Madison Square Garden pulsed with raw energy. Every seat filled every voice, melding into a deafening roar that echoed off the walls. Floodlights beamed down onto the polished octagon at center stage. Cameras flashed like lightning as fans shouted from every corner. Some waved banners, others leaned forward on the edge of their seats, eyes locked on the tunnel entrance. The night's energy felt alive, almost electric, charged with the promise of something big. In the locker room, Jamal, the Apex King, shadowboxed in front of the mirror, his movements quick and precise. Beads of sweat already glistened on his forehead, though the real fight hadn't even begun. He was a specimen of modern MMA perfection. Lightning-fast reflexes, power that seemed impossible for his frame, and a fight IQ that had carried him to a perfect 18 record. But it was the swagger that sold tickets, the way he stared down opponents. The trash talk, the post-fight celebrations that went viral within minutes. 5 minutes, champ, said a production assistant, poking his head through the door. Coach. Roy Beckett, a weathered man with gray stubble and calloused hands, stood in the corner. He'd been training fighters since before Jamal was born, and he'd seen plenty of champions come and go, most of them undone by the same thing that made them great, their belief in their own invincibility. Remember the game plan, Roy said, his voice carrying the gravel of decades spent shouting instructions from corners. He's experienced but slow. Don't get lazy, finish clean. Jamal smirked, already visualizing the highlight reel knockout. Won't even need the second round, coach. Roy nodded, but something in his eyes suggested concern. Not about tonight's fight, Jamal would win, no doubt, but about what came after. The way fame was changing his fighter day by day. Meanwhile, across the arena, a black Lincoln town car pulled up to the VIP entrance. Security guards straightened immediately as the back door opened. Silas Blackwood stepped out, dressed simply in dark slacks and a tailored blazer. No entourage, no fanfare, just quiet confidence earned over decades. Mr. Blackwood, welcome to the event, said the head of security, extending his hand. We've got you seated ringside as requested. Silas nodded, shaking the man's hand firmly. At 75, he moved with the same measured control that had defined his entire career. The years had added lines to his face and silver to his temples, but they hadn't diminished his presence. If anything, age had distilled it to something even more potent, a calm certainty that commanded respect without demanding it. Inside the arena, the lights dimmed. The crowd roared as Big Vinny Stone, the event's announcer, took center stage. His voice boomed through the speaker's showmanship personified. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to UFC Mega Card, he bellowed, arms spread wide. Are you ready for the most explosive night in MMA history? The crowd's response was deafening. Signs waved, phones lifted to capture every moment. Among the celebrities in the front row, cameras found faces from Hollywood, the music industry sports stars, but none of them generated the subtle ripple of awe that spread as Silas Blackwood quietly took his seat. A few nearby fans nudged each other, pointing discreetly. "Did you see who just sat down? Is that really him? Mia Delgado?" The UFC's lead interviewer and a former fighter herself noted Silas's arrival through her earpiece. She smiled, remembering stories her father told of his tournaments in the 70s. Real martial arts before the sport became as much about personality as prowess. "We've got a special guest tonight," she said into her microphone, her voice carrying to viewers worldwide. The legend himself, Silas the Ghost Blackwood, taking in the action from ringside. The camera panned briefly to Silas, who acknowledged it with a modest nod. No peacocking, no need to dominate the moment. His legacy spoke for itself. The prelim fights passed in a blur of action, the crowd growing more electric with each bout. Then the lights dimmed again. Smoke machines filled the tunnel with atmospheric haze. The opening notes of Jamal's entrance music hit a pounding Detroit hip-hop bass line that rattled the garden's foundations. "Ladies and gentlemen," Big Vinny's voice reached a crescendo. "It's time for our main event." Introducing first the challenger, a veteran with 27 professional fights, Marcus the Mountain Rivera. Rivera entered to respectful applause, a fighter's fighter known for his grit and technique. He'd earned his title shot the hard way, grinding through the ranks year after year. And now Vinny paused for dramatic effect, defending his title for the 5th time with a perfect professional record of 18 wins, 0 losses. The man who reigns supreme in the octagon, Jamal the Apex. Ki-ang! The arena exploded. Jamal emerged through the smoke arms raised, spinning slowly to absorb the adoration from every angle. His walkout was choreographed to perfection, part fighter, part rock star. He bounced down the aisle, slapping hands with fans, pausing to flex for cameras. Every movement calculated to feed the Apex brand. From his seat, Silas watched silently, seeing beyond the spectacle and to the fighter beneath. Talent was there undeniably, but something else, too. Something that often preceded a fall. Inside the cage, final instructions were given. The fighters touched gloves, Rivera respectfully Jamal, with a smirk and a wink to the camera. The referee stepped back. The bell rang. Jamal exploded forward immediately. No feeling out process. No respect for Rivera's experience. He pressed forward with a barrage of strikes, jabs, crosses, a high kick that just missed. Rivera backpedaled, trying to establish distance, but Jamal cut off the cage expertly. "King showing why he's the champion," Mia commented from her position. "The speed advantage is obvious from the opening seconds." Midway through the first round, Jamal began talking. "That all you got, old man?" he taunted loud enough for the front rows to hear. Rivera fired back with a sharp counter, almost catching him, but Jamal slipped it effortlessly, his smirk widening. "Come on, hit me," he shouted, playing to the crowd. Rivera adjusted, trying to gain ground to block to find an opening, but Jamal wouldn't give him the chance. He feinted left, snapped a kick to the ribs, then rushed in close hooks to the body, jab to the nose. He pressed Rivera against the cage, leaning in close enough to whisper another taunt. "You don't belong in here with me." Rivera pushed him off, circling away, but Jamal stalked him, confident, predatory. The end came suddenly. A lightning-fast combination, left hook to the body, right uppercut, as Rivera dropped his guard, then a devastating head kick that connected with a sickening thud. Rivera crumpled. The referee dove between them, waving off the fight. The crowd erupted. "It's over!" Big Vinny shouted into his mic. 1 minute, 47 seconds into the first round, Jamal, the Apex King, remains undefeated. Medics rushed into the cage as Jamal paraded around its perimeter, arms raised high, soaking in the adulation. He leaped onto the fence, pumping his fists, shouting to his fans. Some cheered wildly, thrilled by his dominance. Others murmured uncomfortable with his showboating while Rivera was still being attended to. Silas remained seated, expression unchanged. He'd seen this story before, talented fighters mistaking theatrical dominance for mastery. His eyes tracked Jamal not with judgment, but with the quiet assessment of someone who had forgotten more about fighting than most would ever learn. Rivera was helped to his feet, dazed but conscious. He tried to approach Jamal for the customary post-fight acknowledgement, but Jamal was too busy playing to the crowd. The gesture of sportsmanship went unnoticed or ignored. Big Vinny entered the cage for the official decision, but Jamal grabbed the microphone before the announcer could speak. "Did anybody expect anything different?" he shouted, voice echoing through the arena. "That's how you finish a fight. That's what real champions do." And Coach Roy shook his head slightly from the corner, but Jamal was beyond hearing any counsel now. The crowd's energy fed him, pushed him further. 18-0, he continued, pacing the cage like a caged predator. "Who's next? Who's got the guts to step in here with me?" His eyes scanned the arena, the front row, and then he saw him. Silas Blackwood sitting calmly watching. The perfect target. The ultimate clout chase. Jamal's grin widened. He pointed directly at Silas, still breathing heavy from the fight. "Wait, is that Silas Blackwood? I see, the legend himself." His voice dripped with theatrical respect that quickly dissolved into mockery. "Man, the old heads in Detroit still tell stories about you. Heard you were the baddest man on the block back in the day." A hush fell over sections of the crowd. Cameras swiveled toward Silas, who remained perfectly still, eyes fixed on Jamal. "You know," Jamal continued, feeding off the sudden tension, "people always wonder how the old legends would do in today's game. What do you say? Silas, want to step in here. Show these people if those old-school moves work in a real fight." Gasps rippled through the audience. Mia Delgado's eyes widened at the audacity. "King is actually calling out Silas Blackwood," she said into her headset, disbelief evident in her voice. "This is unprecedented." Silas didn't react immediately. He sat motionless, eyes locked on Jamal. No smile, no anger, just watchful calm. Jamal bounced on his toes, emboldened by the silence. "What's the matter?" Age finally catch up with the legend. "Come on. Silas, 1 round. Exhibition. Let's settle the debate. Old school versus new school." Then slowly, deliberately, Silas Blackwood stood. The arena fell silent. Phones lifted higher, every camera fixed on the martial arts icon as he rose to his full height. Jamal's smirk faltered for just a moment before returning wider than before. "Oh, he's standing up," Jamal shouted, excitement building in his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, are we about to witness history?" Silas didn't speak. He simply held Jamal's gaze across the distance between them, the weight of his presence filling the arena more completely than any shouted challenge ever could. And in that moment, as chants of "Silas, Silas, Silas" began to rise from the crowd, Coach Roy Beckett closed his eyes briefly. He recognized what his fighter couldn't, that some challenges once issued change everything. That some legends remain legends for reasons beyond the spotlight. That some lessons can only be learned the hard way. The chants grew louder, rolling through Madison Square Garden like thunder. "Silas, Silas, Silas." Smartphones lifted in every direction, recording what was quickly becoming the most unexpected moment in UFC history. Jamal, the Apex King, stood in the center of the octagon, microphone still in hand, his cocky smile now looking slightly fixed as Silas Blackwood remained standing silent and unreadable. Big Vinny Stone rushed over trying to reclaim control of the situation. He reached for the microphone, but Jamal turned away, still focused on Silas. "Come on, legend," Jamal called out, his voice carrying over the crowd's roar. "One round, just me and you, unless those moves only work with camera tricks." Silas remained silent, but his eyes, sharp-focused, penetrating, never left Jamal's. Then, with deliberate calm, he removed his blazer, folded it neatly, and handed it to a security guard. The gesture was simple, but its meaning unmistakable. The crowd's volume doubled instantly. Mia Delgado leaned into her broadcast microphone, voice tight with professional restraint that barely contained her excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen, I can't believe what we're seeing." Silas Blackwood appears to be accepting Jamal King's challenge. For those who might only know him from folklore, let me remind you, this is a man who was the undefeated All-American full-contact champion for nearly a decade. His legitimate martial arts credentials are beyond question. In Jamal's corner, Coach Roy Beckett moved quickly to the cage, gripping the fence. "Jamal, get over here now," he barked, his weathered face tight with concern. Jamal jogged over, still riding the adrenaline high of his victory and the crowd's energy. "Can you believe this, Coach Silas Blackwood? This'll go viral worldwide." Roy grabbed him by the shoulder, pulling him closer. "Listen to me, this isn't a game. That man in the front row isn't some actor, he's the real deal. I saw him fight in a closed-door tournament back in the 80s. Never seen anything like it." "He's 75 years old, Coach," Jamal interrupted, rolling his eyes. "It's just for show. Great publicity. I'll go easy, make it look good." "You're not hearing me." Roy's voice dropped lower, urgent. "Age doesn't erase what's bone deep. You watch his eyes, not his hands, not his feet. His eyes. They'll tell you what's coming." Before Jamal could respond, UFC officials were converging near Silas's seat. The company president was there, gesturing animatedly, clearly concerned about the spontaneous challenge. Insurance issues, liability questions, regulatory problems. But the crowd wasn't having it. The chanting had become deafening. Social media was already exploding. The moment was bigger than regulations. After a hurried conference, the president nodded reluctantly and approached the cage, whispering to Big Vinny, who broke into a huge grin. Vinny raised the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, it appears we have a very special exhibition bout about to take place." The arena erupted. UFC management has approved a single-round exhibition between our champion and the legendary Silas the Ghost Blackwood. This is not an official bout, just two martial artists about to give us a moment we'll never forget. Medical staff approached Silas, attempting to do a cursory check, but he waved them off with polite firmness. He removed his watch, handing it to a security guard, then his phone. Each movement was economical, unhurried. "This is unprecedented." Mia continued her commentary, trying to provide context for viewers. Silas Blackwood isn't just a folk hero. He developed his own system, Urban Kempo, incorporating elements from countless disciplines. He holds high-ranking black belts in Kyokushin, Karate, Goju Ryu, and Judo. Silas approached the cage steps with the same measured pace he'd maintained all evening. No rushing, no hesitation, just purpose in every step. The security staff moved aside instinctively. One held the cage door open with a respectful nod. Inside the octagon, Jamal bounced from foot to foot, shaking out his arms, trying to keep his muscles warm after his previous fight. Despite his bravado, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face as he watched Silas climb the steps. There was something unnerving about the older man's composure, something that didn't fit the narrative Jamal had constructed in his mind. Silas entered the cage without fanfare. He stood for a moment, feeling the canvas under his feet, acclimatizing to the space. His expression remained neutral. Not stern, not tense, simply focused. He stretched his neck slightly, rolled his shoulders once. Big Vinny could barely contain himself. This was the kind of moment announcers dreamed about, pure, unscripted drama. "In this corner," he shouted, pointing to Jamal, "our reigning, defending, undefeated UFC champion Jamal, the Apex King." The crowd responded with mixed cheers and boos, more boos than Jamal was accustomed to hearing. "And in this corner?" Vinny continued, his voice shifting to an almost reverent tone. "Martial arts legend, 7-time undefeated world champion and cultural icon, Silas the Ghost Blackwood." The response was thunderous. People who had been seated all night were on their feet. Camera flashes created a strobing effect around the cage. Silas acknowledged the reception with a small nod. Nothing more. His focus remained internal-centered. A referee entered the cage, the same one who had overseen Jamal's title defense minutes earlier. He looked uncertain about this improvised arrangement, but professional enough to adapt. He motioned both men to the center. "All right, gentlemen, we're doing one 5-minute round. Exhibition rules. I want a clean fight. Protect yourselves at all times. Touch gloves if you want." Jamal extended his gloved fist with a smirk. "Hope you're ready for this, old-timer." Silas touched gloves briefly, respectfully, but said nothing. His silence was beginning to irritate Jamal, chipping away at the champion's confident facade. As they returned to their respective sides, Mia's voice grew more serious in her commentary. "What we're about to witness is more than just a novelty exhibition. This is a clash of eras, modern MMA showmanship against traditional martial arts philosophy. King represents the new school flashy, outspoken social media savvy. Blackwood embodies the old ways, discipline, humility, letting your skills speak for themselves." Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The referee raised his hand. The crowd held its collective breath. "Fight!" Jamal exploded forward immediately, just as he had against Rivera. No respect, no caution, pure aggression meant to overwhelm and intimidate. He launched a blistering combination jab, cross, left hook, thrown with professional precision and speed. None of them landed. Silas slipped the jab, parried the cross, and simply wasn't there for the hook. His movement was minimal, efficient. No wasted energy, no flashy evasions, just gone like smoke through fingers. Jamal blinked momentarily confused, then pressed forward again. Flying knee, rear elbow, spinning back kick. Each attack more dynamic than the last, designed not just to damage, but to create a highlight. Silas neutralized each one, not with matching athleticism, but with positioning timing and an almost preternatural ability to read Jamal's intentions. Where Jamal was explosive, Silas was economical. Where Jamal attacked with 6 movements, Silas defended with 1. Frustration flickered across Jamal's face. He wasn't landing anything clean. Worse, he was beginning to feel as if he were being studied, analyzed. Silas hadn't thrown a single strike yet. He was simply observing, adapting, gathering data with each exchange. Incredible defensive movement from Blackwood. Mia observed her professional tone giving way to genuine awe. King is throwing everything in his arsenal, but Blackwood is making him miss by mere inches each time. This is master-level distance management. Jamal backed up, reassessing. The cocky smile was gone now, replaced by focused determination. He circled left, feinted a jab, then shot in for a takedown, changing levels with the speed that had demolished so many previous opponents. Silas sprawled, perfectly hips, heavy posture, balanced. Not only did he stop the takedown, but he used Jamal's momentum to guide him past, leaving the champion off balance and vulnerable. It would have been the perfect moment for a counterattack, but Silas simply reset his position, patient waiting. The crowd was growing louder with each exchange, but the tenor had changed. These weren't the bloodthirsty roars that accompanied Jamal's usual dominance. There was wonder in the sound now. Appreciation, respect. "Fight back," Jamal shouted suddenly, frustration breaking through. "Come on, throw something." For the first time, the faintest hint of a smile touched the corner of Silas's mouth. He inclined his head slightly. Acknowledgement, not mockery, and settled deeper into his stance. Jamal charged again, throwing a blistering five-punch combination that would have finished most opponents. Silas slipped the first two, blocked the third, parried the fourth, and then for the first time he countered. It wasn't spectacular. No spinning kick, no leaping punch. Just a simple straight right hand that connected with Jamal's solar plexus as he extended for his final hook. The impact stopped Jamal mid-motion. Air rushed from his lungs. His eyes widened in shock, not from pain, though there was plenty, but from the precision, the perfect placement. The way Silas had found the exact moment when he was most exposed. "First strike from Blackwood and it's textbook perfect," Mia exclaimed. "That's the difference between fighting for cameras and fighting from decades of real experience. Economy of motion, perfect timing." Jamal stumbled back, trying to regain his composure. Something fundamental had shifted in the cage. The narrative he'd constructed, young lion versus old legend, new school dominating old school, was unraveling with each passing second. In his corner, Coach Roy watched with a mixture of concern and grim vindication. He'd tried to warn Jamal. Some lessons couldn't be taught secondhand. "Jamal," he called out, "slow down, find your rhythm." But Jamal was beyond hearing now. His breathing had quickened. Sweat poured down his face. For the first time in his professional career, he felt something alien creeping into his consciousness, doubt. Silas stood calmly in the center of the octagon, hands raised in his traditional guard position. Nothing flashy, nothing intimidating, just fundamentally sound, honed by decades of practice and real combat experience. "Don't let him in your head," Roy shouted from the corner. "Stick to what you know." Jamal nodded sharply, trying to reset mentally. He approached more cautiously this time, respecting the distance, probing with jabs rather than committing to power shots. Silas watched patient as stone feet rooted to the canvas, yet ready to move in any direction. His eyes clear, focused, unblinking, tracked every feint, every shift in weight, every telegraphed intention. The arena had grown strangely quiet. The usual bloodlust of the crowd replaced by collective anticipation. They weren't watching just another fight now. They were witnessing something rarer, a masterclass, a living demonstration of why some reputations endure beyond spotlight or spectacle. 30 seconds in, and the dynamic has completely changed, Mia narrated softly. What began as a publicity stunt has become a profound martial arts moment. Look at King's body language. He's fighting a completely different fight now. It was true. Jamal's characteristic swagger had vanished. His movements were more hesitant, his formerly boundless confidence visibly shaken. He launched another combination technically perfect but somehow hollow, fighting by rote rather than with conviction. Silas parried the final strike, and for the second time countered. A simple side kick to the knee, not thrown to damage, but to disrupt balance to create an opening. Jamal stumbled slightly, dropping his guard for a fraction of a second. It was enough. Silas stepped forward and landed a perfect textbook jab, snapping Jamal's head back, bloodying his nose. The crowd gasped collectively. "This isn't just an old legend holding his own," Mia said, her voice hushed with respect. "Silas Blackwood is systematically taking apart a UFC champion." On the canvas, something broke in Jamal's eyes, the last remnants of his certainty, the foundation of his identity as an untouchable champion. He charged forward with a roar, abandoning technique for raw aggression, throwing wild hooks and haymakers. Silas simply wasn't there. like fighting a shadow, a memory, a legend that refused to diminish with time. At Cage's Big Vinnie Stone stood open-mouthed for once, without commentary. Even he who made his living from hyperbole recognized that no words could enhance what they were witnessing. The crowd began to chant again, "Silas, Silas, Silas." And in the center of the cage, as Jamal King faced the unraveling of everything he believed about himself, Silas Blackwood continued to move with the same measured calm he'd shown since the moment he entered the arena. Not fighting for cameras, not fighting for legacy, fighting for something older, deeper, and far more enduring. 2 minutes into the exhibition, sweat poured down Jamal King's face in rivulets. His breath came in sharp bursts. Blood from his nose had dried in a crimson streak across his cheek. Yet for all his exertion, he had nothing to show for it. No damage inflicted, no advantage gained, not even the satisfaction of having forced Silas Blackwood to break his methodical rhythm. Silas stood 5 feet away, his breathing controlled and even. No wasted movement, no unnecessary effort. His eyes remained fixed on Jamal, alert but unhurried. If he was experiencing any fatigue, it remained invisible. The contrast was striking Jamal, the professional athlete in peak physical condition, showing clear signs of strain, while Silas, at 75 years old, appeared as composed as when he'd first entered the cage. "What we're seeing is the difference between conditioning and efficiency," Mia Delgado explained to viewers, her voice hushed with respect. "King is in phenomenal athletic shape, but he's burning energy with every explosive movement. Blackwood is operating on decades of refined technique, using precisely what's needed, nothing more." The crowd had settled into an unusual pattern. Where UFC events typically featured constant noise cheers, jeers, chants, now a strange quiet had descended, broken only by gasps and murmurs when Silas executed a particularly deft defensive maneuver. They weren't watching a fight anymore. They were witnessing a demonstration. Jamal circled right, frustration evident in his tightened jaw. "Fight back," he demanded, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "Stop running." Silas's expression didn't change. No anger at the taunt, no visible reaction at all. He adjusted his position slightly, maintaining optimal distance. In the champion's corner, Coach Roy leaned against the fence, his weathered face a mask of concern and resignation. He'd seen this scenario play out before, talented fighters undone not by a lack of skill, but by a lack of understanding. Physical ability without philosophical foundation. "Breathe, Jamal," he called out. "Find your center." But Jamal was beyond coaching now. His game plan had disintegrated. His confidence, once his greatest weapon, lay in tatters. All that remained was raw emotion and wounded pride, a dangerous combination for any fighter. He lunged forward again, throwing a flashy, spinning back fist that had become one of his signature moves, a technique that had made highlight reels and social media compilations throughout his career. Silas didn't just avoid it, he made it look predictable. As Jamal's arm whirled through empty air, Silas stepped in not to counter with his own strike, but to subtly disrupt Jamal's balance with a gentle shoulder check. The champion stumbled, nearly falling, and had to awkwardly regain his footing. The maneuver hadn't hurt him physically, but the psychological impact was devastating. His most dramatic technique hadn't just been defended. It had been dismissed. Mia leaned forward in her commentator's seat. "Did you see that Blackwood could have capitalized with a damaging counter, but he chose control over punishment? He's not trying to hurt King. He's teaching him." The crowd sensed it too. The atmosphere in the garden had transformed from bloodthirsty anticipation to something approaching reverence. Phones remained raised, recording every second, but the viewers behind them watched with different eyes now. "Stop playing with me!" Jamal shouted, genuine anger replacing his earlier showmanship. "Throw something real!" For the first time, Silas spoke, his voice calm, clear, carrying easily despite the arena's size. "I am." Just 2 words, but they landed with more impact than any physical strike. Jamal blinked momentarily, frozen by the simple response. Silas continued, his tone conversational, as if they were discussing philosophy in a dojo, rather than facing off in an octagon surrounded by thousands. "Fighting isn't about who hits hardest or moves fastest. It's about who controls themselves first, their opponent second." The arena fell completely silent, straining to catch every word. Jamal shook his head, trying to clear it. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was the champion, the main event, the star. Yet somehow he'd become a supporting character in his own story. He attacked again, this time with greater technical discipline, a clean 1-2 combination followed by a leg kick. Textbook MMA executed with professional precision. Silas slipped the punches by millimeters, then checked the kick not with dramatic force, but with calm efficiency. As Jamal's leg rebounded from the check, Silas finally unleashed a genuine counterattack. It wasn't flashy. No spinning kick, no leaping punch. Just 3 perfectly placed strikes in rapid succession, a straight jab to create distance, a cross to the body that folded Jamal slightly forward, and a short uppercut that snapped his head back. Each strike landed with surgical precision. Not thrown to knock out, but to demonstrate, to illuminate the gaps in Jamal's defense, the flaws in his approach. The champion staggered backward, more surprised than hurt. He'd been hit harder in previous fights, taken more damage, faced more aggressive opponents, but he'd never felt so thoroughly red, so completely exposed. "Remarkable," Mia exclaimed. Silas Blackwood just delivered a classic karate combination, simple, direct, effective. That's traditional martial arts philosophy in action, no wasted motion, maximum effect. In the crowd, fans who had come expecting entertainment were receiving education instead. Many had never seen traditional martial arts executed at this level. Not the Hollywood version, not the tournament version, but the real application by a genuine master. Jamal touched his face where the uppercut had landed, looking at the blood on his glove with something approaching wonder. The pain wasn't significant, but the precision was astonishing. Silas had found a gap in his defense that neither he nor his coaches had identified through 18 professional fights. "Now he gets it," Coach Roy murmured too quietly for anyone to hear. He recognized the look in Jamal's eyes, the first glimmer of genuine understanding breaking through the shell of ego. Jamal approached again, but differently now, more measured, more thoughtful. He threw a probing jab, not committing, just testing. Silas parried it gently, then nodded a small gesture of approval. "Better." Something shifted in Jamal's expression, a flicker of recognition, of respect reluctantly given. He tried another combination, still aggressive, but more controlled. Silas defended, then countered with a single body shot, not to hurt, but to indicate where the opening had been. A teacher's correction rather than a fighter's attack. What we're witnessing goes beyond fighting. Mia observed, her professional detachment giving way to genuine emotion. This is the passing of knowledge across generations happening right before our eyes. The crowd began to sense it too. The jeers had completely stopped. The bloodlust had evaporated. They were no longer spectators at a fight. They were witnesses to something approaching a sacred ritual. At cageaside, Big Vinny Stone stood uncharacteristically silent. Even he, with his wrestler's instinct for showmanship, recognized that his usual bombastic commentary would be inappropriate, like shouting in a temple. 3 minutes into the round, the dynamic had completely transformed. Jamal was no longer fighting to win or even to save face. He was fighting to understand. Each exchange a question, each defensive movement by Silas an answer. "Keep your right hand higher," Silas said quietly, after slipping another of Jamal's combinations. "You drop it when you throw the left hook." Jamal nodded automatically, adjusting his guard. Only afterward did the strangeness of the moment register, taking technical advice from an opponent in the middle of what was supposed to be a confrontation. Silas continued, his voice remaining calm, instructional. "Power comes from your roots, up not from the arm. Root yourself first." With each exchange, with each piece of advice, the exhibition evolved further away from combat and closer to communion. Two martial artists separated by generations, but connected by discipline. In Jamal's corner, Coach Roy watched with an expression that had softened from concern to something approaching pride. Not pride in his fighter's performance, but pride in witnessing his growth, seeing the first cracks in the armor of arrogance that had both propelled Jamal to championship status and threatened to be his undoing. "King is adapting before our eyes," Mia narrated softly. "Look at his movement now. More economical, more centered. He's absorbing decades of martial wisdom in minutes." It was true. Jamal's wild aggression had given way to something more measured. He still attacked with the athleticism and technical skill that had made him champion, but now there was thought behind each movement, purpose beyond simply overwhelming. 4 minutes in the exhibition had become something none of the thousands in attendance had expected. Not a fight, not a spectacle, but a living demonstration of martial arts at its most profound. Silas continued to control the space, to dictate the terms of each engagement, but there was no dominance in his manner. Only instruction. Only guidance. When he struck, it was to illuminate, not to damage. When he defended, it was to demonstrate, not to humiliate. What Jamal King called for was a fight, Mia said, her voice thick with emotion. What Silas Blackwood delivered was a lesson. The crowd watched in reverent silence now, phones still recording but somehow less intrusive. Many spectators who had come for blood sport found themselves witnessing something that transcended competition, a direct transmission of knowledge that reached back through centuries of martial tradition. With 30 seconds remaining in the round, Silas finally spoke again, loud enough for many in the front rows to hear. "True strength doesn't come from dominating others. It comes from mastering yourself." Jamal paused, chest-heaving, sweat and blood mingling on his face. For the first time all night, his expression held no trace of arrogance or defiance. Something was breaking through a realization that transcended the moment, the arena, the spectacle he had created. "Then why fight at all?" he asked, genuine curiosity replacing his earlier hostility. Silas nodded, acknowledging the sincerity of the question. "To remind ourselves what we're capable of, and what we're not." The final seconds of the round ticked down. Neither man launched another attack. Instead, they circled each other in a strange harmony. Distance maintained, respect growing with each passing moment. When the buzzer sounded, signaling the end of the 5-minute exhibition, the arena erupted not in the usual post-fight frenzy, but in a standing ovation. Phones remained raised, capturing what everyone present understood was a historic moment. Not because of its spectacle, but because of its substance. Big Vinny approached the cage, microphone in hand, but for once seemed uncertain about how to frame what they had all witnessed. The usual superlatives felt inadequate, almost disrespectful. In the center of the octagon, Silas extended his hand to Jamal. Not a perfunctory touch of gloves, but a genuine gesture. Fighter to fighter, martial artist to martial artist. Jamal hesitated only briefly before accepting it, his grip firm, his eyes finally meeting Silas's, without challenge or bravado. Something fundamental had shifted in the young champion's demeanor. A seed planted that would continue growing long after the lights dimmed and the crowd dispersed. As they held the handshake, Silas spoke one final time, his voice low but carrying to those nearby. "The real fight isn't in here," he gestured to the cage around them. "It's in here." He touched his chest briefly, and with those words the third act of the evening drew to a close. Not with a dramatic knockout or a decisive victory, but with a moment of connection that bridged generations, styles, and philosophies. In the commentator's booth, Mia Delgado wiped away a tear that had formed despite her professional composure. "I've covered hundreds of fights," she said softly into her microphone, "but I've never seen one that mattered more." The buzz in the arena hadn't diminished as Silas and Jamal returned to their respective corners. If anything, the energy had intensified, transformed from the usual bloodthirsty anticipation into something more reverent, more aware of the moment's significance. Coach Roy slipped between the cage ropes, towel in hand, and approached Jamal with watchful eyes. He'd expected to find his fighter angry, embarrassed, defensive, all the usual reactions of a dominant champion facing unexpected challenge. Instead, he found Jamal quiet, introspective, his gaze fixed on Silas across the octagon. "You okay?" Roy asked, dabbing at the blood on Jamal's face. Jamal nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'm good." His voice lacked its usual bravado. "He's not what I expected." Roy's weathered face softened. "Legends rarely are." Meanwhile, at Silas's corner, no entourage waited. No coaches, no cutmen, no trainers calling out instructions. Silas stood alone, as he had entered self-contained, self-sufficient. He took a small sip of water, then set the bottle down carefully. Big Vinny approached Silas's side of the cage, microphone in hand, eager to capitalize on the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we're witnessing tonight is absolutely unprecedented. The legendary Silas Blackwood has just—" Silas raised a hand, gently stopping Vinny mid-sentence. "Not yet," he said quietly. "We're not finished." The arena fell silent again, anticipation building. What more could there be? The exhibition round had been scheduled for 5 minutes. The handshake had been exchanged. Symbolically, philosophically, the encounter seemed complete. Yet something in Silas's demeanor suggested otherwise. He turned back towards the center of the cage, eyes finding Jamal's again across the distance. "One more round," Silas said, his voice carrying despite its measured tone. "If you're willing." The crowd erupted, phones raising higher, social media feeds flooding with real-time updates. Hat King V's Blackwood was already trending worldwide, clips from the first round spreading virally across platforms. In Jamal's corner, Coach Roy's eyes widened with concern. "Jamal," he said urgently, "you don't need to do this. You've shown respect. It's enough." But Jamal was already removing the towel from his shoulders, handing it back to Roy. Something had shifted in him, not just tactically, but fundamentally. The cocky showman who had entered the cage earlier that night seemed to have receded, revealing something more authentic beneath. "I need to," he said simply. Roy searched his fighter's face, then nodded reluctantly. "Remember what you've learned already. Don't go back to who you were 5 minutes ago." Jamal stepped forward, returning to the center of the octagon, where Silas already waited. The referee, still processing this unplanned extension, hurried to join them. "Are both fighters ready to continue?" he asked, protocol reasserting itself despite the unprecedented situation. Silas nodded once. Jamal did the same. "Very well. Second round. Fight." But neither man exploded into action as the crowd might have expected. Instead, they circled each other with newfound awareness, like dancers who had learned each other's rhythms, fighters who had transcended mere competition. Mia Delgado leaned forward in her commentator's seat, voice hushed with anticipation. "What we're seeing is extraordinary. King isn't attacking wildly anymore. He's measuring, assessing, bringing real strategy against Blackwood's experience." It was true. Jamal's movement had changed dramatically. Gone were the flashy spins and leaps that had characterized his championship run. Instead, he moved with measured purpose, each step deliberate, each feint meaningful. He threw a probing jab not to damage, but to gather information. Silas parried it with typical efficiency, but nodded slightly acknowledgement of the improved approach. "King is fighting like a completely different person," Mia continued. "It's as if the first round stripped away the performance, leaving only the martial artist." From his corner, Coach Roy watched with growing pride. This was the fighter he had always believed Jamal could be technically brilliant, physically gifted, but now adding the one element that had been missing: humility before the art itself. The exchanges grew more technical, more nuanced. Jamal would attack with a combination. Silas would defend, then counter just enough to indicate the weakness that had been exposed. It became less a fight than a dialogue, techniques and responses forming a physical conversation about martial philosophy. 2 minutes into the second round, something remarkable happened. Jamal executed a perfect combination jab-cross hook that momentarily broke through Silas's defense. The hook grazed Silas's temple. Not hard enough to damage, but clean contact nonetheless. The crowd gasped. Silas himself looked momentarily surprised. Then a genuine smile broke across his face. He nodded appreciatively. "Good," he said. "Very good." Jamal didn't celebrate the minor victory. No raised arms, no playing to the cameras. Instead, he simply resumed his stance, acknowledging the moment with quiet focus, rather than exuberance. In the commentator's booth, Mia struggled to contain her emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we're witnessing transcends sport. This is master and student finding each other across generations, the essence of martial arts tradition playing out on our sport's biggest stage." The crowd seemed to understand it too. The usual chants and jeers had given way to appreciative murmurs, collective gasps at particularly skillful exchanges, spontaneous applause for moments of technical brilliance from either man. 3 minutes in, Silas began to increase the tempo, not with aggression, but with complexity. His counters became more intricate, his defensive movements more challenging to read. He wasn't trying to overwhelm Jamal. He was inviting him deeper into the conversation. Jamal responded in kind. His attacks grew more thoughtful, more creative, not wild haymakers or predictable combinations, but genuine problem-solving in real time. When one approach failed, he adapted immediately, learning with each exchange. "This is remarkable," Mia said, shaking her head in wonder. "King is evolving before our eyes. This isn't just an adjustment to an opponent, it's a transformation of a fighter's entire approach." 4 minutes into the second round, something shifted again. Silas stepped back, slightly lowered his hands, just a fraction, not in carelessness, but in invitation. "Show me what you've learned," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the hushed arena. Jamal hesitated, understanding the significance of the moment. Then, with newfound clarity, he attacked not with his signature moves or crowd-pleasing techniques, but with something that appeared almost choreographed in its precision, a 3-strike combination followed by a sweeping low kick executed with perfect balance and control. Silas defended the first 2 strikes, slipped the third, and checked the kick. But the entire sequence was different from anything Jamal had shown previously. It wasn't copied from Silas's style or borrowed from traditional martial arts. It was something new, Jamal's natural athleticism and technical MMA skill, but informed by the wisdom Silas had demonstrated. Fusion, evolution, growth. Silas's eyes lit with genuine approval. Now you're finding your own way. In that moment, something rare and precious crystallized in the octagon, a connection that transcended competition, that reached back through centuries of martial tradition. The young champion wasn't simply facing an aging legend. He was being initiated into a lineage that valued substance over spectacle, mastery over dominance. The final 30 seconds of the round unfolded like a demonstration, rather than a contest, each man offering techniques, responses, counters, not to defeat the other, but to expand the collective understanding of what fighting could be at its highest level. When the buzzer sounded ending, the impromptu second round, neither Silas nor Jamal looked tired. Physically, they had exerted themselves, but spiritually, energetically, they seemed revitalized, as if they had tapped into something that nourished rather than depleted. The crowd rose to its feet, applause thundering through the arena. Not the usual bloodthirsty roar that followed a knockout, but something deeper: appreciation, respect, recognition of having witnessed something authentic and profound. As they met in the center one final time, Silas placed both hands on Jamal's shoulders, a gesture more meaningful than any trophy presentation or belt ceremony. "Remember this feeling," Silas said, his voice low but intense. "Not the crowd, not the cameras. This clarity. This is what it means to be a martial artist, not just a fighter." Jamal nodded, eyes clear with understanding. "Thank you," he said simply. Big Vinny approached cautiously, sensing that the moment demanded restraint, even from him. He offered the microphone to Silas first, but the legend shook his head, gesturing toward Jamal instead. Vinny extended the microphone to the champion, who took it with uncharacteristic hesitation. The arena fell silent, thousands leaning forward to hear what the brash, cocky fighter would say after such a transformative experience. Jamal looked at the microphone in his hand, then out at the expectant crowd, then finally at Silas, who watched him with calm, patient eyes. "I came in here tonight thinking I knew what fighting was about," Jamal began, his voice lacking its usual performative quality. "I thought it was about being the loudest, the most dominant, the one everyone talked about tomorrow." He paused, gathering his thoughts, no longer playing to the cameras, but speaking from somewhere authentic. "What I learned tonight is that true strength doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need highlight reels or trash talk." He turned toward Silas. "I called out a legend thinking I'd add another name to my record. Instead, I found a teacher." The crowd's response was immediate applause rippling through the arena, punctuated by shouts of approval and respect. Jamal handed the microphone back to Vinny, who turned expectantly to Silas. This time the legend accepted it, but his words were characteristically few, measured impactful. "Fighting reveals character," Silas said, his voice steady. "Tonight, I saw a champion become a martial artist." He nodded toward Jamal. "That transformation is worth more than any belt." With those words, he handed the microphone back and turned toward the cage door, ready to exit as quietly as he had entered, letting his actions speak louder than any victory speech could. As Silas moved toward the exit, cameras following his every step, Mia delivered her final commentary on the unprecedented encounter. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we witnessed tonight wasn't just an exhibition. It was a passing of wisdom, a bridge between eras, a reminder that beneath the spectacle of modern MMA lies the timeless essence of martial arts. Jamal King came in as the champion. He leaves as something more important, a student of the deeper way." and as the arena lights gleamed off the sweat on both men's brows, as social media exploded with clips and quotes and hashtags, as the crowd continued its standing ovation. One truth became evident to all who had witnessed the encounter. Some victories aren't measured in knockouts or submissions, but in moments of transformation that continue long after the cage door closes. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.